Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program tonight, 142 people were taken into custody on Sunday after the Hyderabad Police busted a rave party at a pub in a five-star hotel in the city. Those taken into custody include celebrities, star kids, children of prominent politicians, even a top bureaucrat. Contraband like weed and cocaine was seized from them. Now, a day later, those named were let off after collecting blood samples, but the probe is continuing on who consumed the drugs, who supplied the banned substances, and who was peddling them. Now, the raid on high-profile celebrities comes months after the Aryan Khan case. While there were narcotics which were found, none were found on Aryan Khan personally, remember. While action must be taken against peddlers and consumers, the broad sweep of the law often means that people with no connection whatsoever to drugs are necessarily caught. So our people are targeted. Are they necessarily the people who should be targeted in the first place? Later on the program, a new COVID variant called the XE variant is discovered. It's prevalent in the United Kingdom and in China, where the numbers are surging. This may be 10% more transmissible than even Omicron. Is this new strain a cause of concern? And that question once again, does every adult Indian therefore need a booster? We'll bring you a top panel of doctors. But for now, the Hyderabad rave and then the bust. Joining us now, Aniket Nikam, Satish Manishende, B.V. Kumar, he's a former chief of the Narcotics Control Bureau, and we'll be joined by Rahul Cipriganj, he's a Tollywood singer who was actually present in that party. Mr. Manishende, let me come to you first. Do you see this as part of a pattern where a certain group of people or individuals, well-known, the children of celebrities, celebrities themselves, are targeted in this big manner?
Well, it has become a practice with all the investigating agencies to target high and mighty and particularly children of rich and powerful, because in a large number of parties these days, the youngsters consume a lot of narcotic substances. So the investigating agencies, to highlight such problems, target such rich and powerful, because that's what makes news. If a person from low strata of the society or a low income group is raided, there will be nobody to his rescue. But these kids who have enough resources at their command tend to get into these habits. And recently, there was an article where the police exposed a story where, tattoos are being made, marks, identifying marks for supply of drugs and identifying victims and consumers. So it has become probably a practice of all the investigating agencies to target such rich and powerful people. And in a large number of cases, what happens in our country,
Yep.
Most of these cases fizzle out and they don't reach the case of even a charge sheet.
Mr. B.V. Kumar, I'll just come back to you, sir. Mr. B.V. Kumar, former chief of the Narcotics Control Bureau, also with us. Mr. Kumar, there have been so many high-profile cases, drug busts like this in the recent past. In the Aryan Khan case, which became it was turmoil for the man because there were no drugs which were eventually found on him. Many of these people, 142 of them who were actually arrested and blood tests were done, almost all of them got away. But this is something which stars reputations. It serves to scandalize. And therefore the argument which is made is that, do we need to have such big sweeps? What do they really achieve?
No, I think we should see the problem in a very different perspective, not from the news point of view, as Mr. Manishende said. I agree with him that what is to be seen is whether it's newsworthy or just some high-profile individuals were involved and other things. What this type of rave parties, in this particular case, only 5 grams of cocaine has been seized, allegedly, and the minimum quantity that has been prescribed under the NDPS Act is 2 grams. Anything more than that is supposed to be a large quantity. So that becomes punishable. What I'm worried is not so much about the newsworthy of the presentation by the news agencies or the PTI report, which I had the benefit of reading.
Yes.
But what is important is we are slowly emerging into a drug-consuming country. Initially, we were only a transit country where drugs were passing through India to the Western destinations, particularly USA, where the profits generated were enormous. But in the recent past, the type of seizures that have happened after the Taliban took over Afghanistan on 1st of September last year, immediately we had a 3,000 case heroin seizure at Mundra
Yes.
port. Subsequently, there were 300 case cocaine was seized in a Sri Lankan vessel off the Tamil Nadu coast.
Right.
Like that, a series of major seizures have taken place. And this type of rave parties, apart from the one which was investigated in Bombay, unfortunately was not properly investigated according to me. Earlier in Pune, there were rave parties where the police have raided and probably arrested people, and ultimately they were let off, or I have no idea.
Okay, sir,
I've got,
I take your point, sir. I've also got Rahul Sipligunj. He's a Tollywood singer who was actually there. Rahul, thank you for speaking to us. Can you hear me, Rahul?
Yeah, I can hear you, sir. Hi.
Hi. Rahul, what happened in this party? Can you describe how this bust went? What exactly went down?
Actually, what happened is I have been at the time of 11:30. I reached there, and there was my family friends party was going on. It was a birthday party, so I just went to wish them. And late night after 1:30, Professor and police raid happened. And they said everyone, all 150 members, 200 members, they said to stop here, sir. We need to check everything. So I didn't even know that wasn't, they were checking some drugs or something. So after that, after checking, it was like early morning 3. From there, they took us to police station. And, from in police station, they made us to stay till morning 6:30. After that, they took all our details and everything. And they told us, we'll call you and, we'll call you for the investigation.
So, Rahul, the fact of the matter is that there were drugs which were found, 5 grams at least of cocaine were recovered. Were you aware that this was a sort of party where there could be drugs?
No, sir. See, actually, after coming to police station in the morning hours, I got to know that they were checking for drugs. I thought generally, if it wasn't, if I would know that it wasn't that drugs are going on there. It was my वहाँ पर जाता था ही नहीं. I wouldn't be go there. So I didn't know that wasn't they were checking drugs and everything.
So there was a blood test which was done on you, right? There was a blood test done on you and on the
No, it was not done yet.
But Aniket Nikam, let me come across to you. Mr. Kumar had an interesting point when he said that, look, we need to look at this in a different perspective. India was a transit zone as far as drugs were concerned. They often went to other countries. But now the rules of the game have changed and there is clear evidence to suggest that there is greater consumption. Is that, how do you react to this point? Would you agree?
Well, I think he is right to a certain extent. When the NDPS Act was introduced, the entire intent was to ensure that there is no trafficking of drugs, that international smugglers who get into drugs are, a check is kept on them. That was the main idea. But of late we have seen that there have been a rise in the number of consumers, in the sense we have seen people consuming drugs. We have seen rave parties taking place. We have seen Bollywood actors being summoned by the investigating agencies because they have found some WhatsApp chat here and there. The point that is important is that merely busting a rave party will not serve the purpose. The idea is that they must go to the root of the matter and find out who these suppliers are. Because these suppliers are somebody who do not have a face. They are the ones who supply not just to those who are high and powerful, but to everybody, even on streets, people on streets. They ensure that they get addicted to it. So they need to crack down this angle first. Because what happens is, because there's a lot of publicity involved while cracking or bursting these rave parties, the investigating agencies very merrily go to these rave parties, burst them. There are statements being given across all media channels, and then there is no progress thereafter. We have seen cases where Bollywood celebrities were being summoned by the investigating agencies because they found certain WhatsApp chat, but we do not know what has happened to it thereafter. So all this is merely by bursting a racket or a rave party will not serve the purpose. They need to go to the root of the matter. They need to find out who the suppliers are. They need to burst the chain of supply of these drugs. Until that is done, the menace of drugs will not be kept in check.
Mr. Kumar, reply to that before I go back to Mr. Manishinde. Yeah.
Mr. Nikam is correct. See, you should see the number of drug addicts that have been found out by the Minister for Social Justice. See, they found out that initially during a survey that was conducted by them in 2004, 0.7% of the population was drug addicts. It was about 2 million. In the second survey conducted in 2018-19, it increased to 2%. That's about 22 million. You can imagine 2021-22 how many are there. And the major seizures that are being happening in the last 1 year, initially the 3,000 kgs of heroin, subsequently 300 kgs of cocaine, and so on and so forth. So many cases, major cases were done by the DRI and the customs authorities. They silently investigate, they try to find out who are the real operators behind the whole smuggling, smuggling rackets and other things. Even NIA investigated the Mundra case. Recently they filed a charge sheet and other things. They are doing their job. But the fact remains that this type of rave parties is only an indication that our rich kids, initially from whatever I have seen from my experience, when the type of Tollywood actors or things like that, probably they are initially happy with having girlfriends and other things. Then the kick is not enough. Then they go for the drugs from the, what you call the opium-based drugs and other things.
All right, let me quickly get a reply to that, Mr. Manishande. The kick of relationships not enough. They perhaps need drugs to go to the next level. How would you respond to that?
Well, I don't want to comment on what Mr. Kumar has said, but the life is such that every trend
Mr. Manishande, sorry to interrupt you, but it is a huge stereotype which Mr. Kumar just mentioned. On the one hand, it's very fair to say that, look, the drug seizures in India have gone up. We don't know where it's coming, etc., etc. But the moment you say that there are a certain type of people who consume drugs, that doesn't reflect the complete reality. Drug usage in this country is not something which is just about rich people, not at all. It's across strata. In fact, if there were statistics, perhaps people who are impoverished would be consuming drugs at a very high level as well.
In a large number of cases that I have seen and come across, it's a large number of people from the lower strata also consuming drugs, because at some places it's very easily available and very economically available. Some like a place in Himachal Pradesh or in Punjab or in a place like Goa, it's easily and rampantly available. And we all know that it's coming from the West, it's coming from the international borders, but our agencies are not doing enough to curtail the movement of drugs on the international border. And therefore, as I said earlier, the root cause is the import of these drugs into India. That has to be stopped. And the reason that it is so easily available in India does not restrict it only to the rich and the high and mighty. Everybody and everyone is involved in these. And in a large number of cases, children who get involved with rich families as their friends end up as couriers for those rich and powerful. And I have come across various cases where my own friend's son was involved in such a case, and he used to literally go and pawn jewelry and other valuable stuff to obtain money from the pawners, and then purchase drugs for these people from big families.
Sure.
So you can't castigate or pinpoint at only the high and mighty and rich and powerful children, but it's all over in the society. And like I said earlier, it's easily available in colleges. Youngsters get involved in these, habits at the very beginning of their career, and they get their careers ruined. So what has to be done is to fight the drug money right from the college level.
All right.
And
I think
the amount of drugs that we're seeing now is rampant, and I think it's a very serious problem. It has to be nipped in the bud.
Right. Well, we leave it over there. I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. It has to be nipped in the bud, but perhaps the targeting of this needs to be much more broad-based, not necessarily to a particular type of people on the basis of their relative wealth. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. We're going to quickly move on now to our next topic. New COVID strains have been found in China and the United Kingdom. The World Health Organization defines this as, or designates this as the XE variant. That is a recombinant of BA1 and BA2. Those are Omicron. So it's a recombinant of that. The World Health Organization says that XE may be 10% more transmissible than what we've seen in some of the strains of Omicron. In China, the new subtype of Omicron has been detected. It's called BA1.1. China says the mutation has been detected in a province bordering Shanghai. So just how serious is this? And it really does beg the question, boosters for all adults. When are we going to actually get it in our country, if that offers some sort of additional protection? Joining us, Shashank Joshi, member of the COVID-19 Task Force in Maharashtra, and Dr. Rajiv Dasgupta, member of the National Adverse Effects Following Immunization Committee, chairperson of the Center of Social Medicine and Community Health at JNU. Thank you both very much for being with us. Dr. Shashank Joshi, how do you assess these new variants of COVID? This XE variant, is it a matter of time before it gets here?
So Vishnu, the XE variant from UK, the UK database with 600 plus cases has shown that it is not, it may be more transmissible, but Omicron also was more transmissible, but the virulence is unknown. So currently the data is not very clear, but it appears to be still a nose and a throat COVID and not a lung COVID. So that is a reassuring sign. My bigger worry is the variant from China, because China is a possibility like Omicron, like new variant will come. But if you see the evolution of viruses, normally when a virus evolves after 2 years, and if you look at Spanish flu, it is likely that even if it is more transmissible, the virulence is likely to be less. Of course, this is speculation right now, but we need to be still vigilant. And these are fastly transmissible airborne droplet strains. India is sitting pretty because we have had the same BA2.
Right.
And the other thing is, whatever we know from HIV, the recombinants of HIV never really spread across. And that is something which we know from old anecdotal data or evidence-based data. So from a science standpoint, though there are causes of concern and vigilance, we cannot afford to dismiss it. The XE variant from UK, I'm not as much worried as I'm worried from the Shanghai variant. But we need to be on the vigil. India for next 3 to 6 months, it's unlikely that a major variant of concern will disrupt currently.
Okay. Dr. Dasgupta, is that also your concern, what's being discovered now in Shanghai? What is the science of this strain?
Thank you. That's most likely to be the picture. Also, the fact that large number of cases continue to be reported across the globe means that recombinant forms will appear and will spread in some countries or across some regions. But to put it in current context, in the 29th March WHO situation report, the Southeast Asian region also shows a negative trend of new cases. Of course, it is in the rise in UK, for example, but a new report shows that while prevalence is on decline, which means old cases plus new cases, the incidence is on rise, which means the new cases are rising, but overall it means that the COVID load is coming down. Plus add to the fact that whether it's Omicron or now XE, which is BA1 and BA2 recombinant, it has certainly affected the large urban districts or urban centers primarily, or certainly at the early stages.
Right.
And that's something large megacities in India and developing world in general need to look out for.
Okay. Dr. Joshi, what about boosters now for all adults? Is it time that we move to that?
Vishnu, the booster data from India is yet awaited. For people whose immunity is compromised or immunocompromised frontline healthcare, giving a precautionary dose is reasonable. But remember, a large Indian population has already got exposed,
right,
either to the Delta variant or to the Omicron variant.
Right.
So there is a large natural exposure as well. We are awaiting our sero surveys. So I don't think we should rush for boosters for all. We must complete our primary immunization correctly and appropriately and wait for some better Indian science to be generated on the boosters.
Okay.
Because we have seen in Israel that when they have given 4 boosters also, they still have seen large spikes. So I'm not so certain about the booster science. And I think therefore Indian government has been very correct in using the word that precautionary dose for people who are vulnerable, people who are immunocompromised, or people who are at frontline or at healthcare space.
Okay.
And those spaces definitely need more attention.
Dr. Dasgupta, do you share that view that we don't need boosters right now?
That has by and large been the thinking. However, the new variants, the number of new cases will depend on their immune escape properties. But what is certainly encouraging so far is that vaccines have been able to prevent serious disease, hospitalization, death, etc. And that's something that we continue to witness both through the largely through the Omicron phase, which is called decoupling, that cases increase, but deaths and hospitalizations decrease. Even with the early indication of XE in the UK, the decoupling reasonably seems to hold. The important point is protecting the immunocompromised, not just adults, but immunocompromised children also. This includes children with blood cancers, Down syndrome, or organ transplants, and so on. And that's something on which clarity is required. The other element for which clarity is, and certainly advisory is required for booster doses, is international travel. Now that the Indian international travel schedule has completely opened up. That's something which is quite a priority.
Absolutely. You can't travel to so many countries now without having a booster dose.
Yeah, but there's a catch there. Now, in general, international vaccine requirements are mandated by the WHO.
Right.
For example, for yellow fever, the countries that are relevant, the same rule holds. But what's happening in COVID is different countries are coming up with different rules.
And that in fact, yeah, no, absolutely.
Somewhere WHO needs to step in and have a uniform global
absolutely, sir.
regime.
So I just need to wrap this up. I'm running short on time. Professor Devi Sridhar also waiting to join us in a little while from now. A couple of quick comments coming in on coup. Will a booster help to fight the new COVID strain? China is really struggling. Atul says we can't turn a blind eye to COVID. We need to get booster doses as soon as possible. Well, earlier today I spoke to Professor Devi Sridhar, Professor and Chair of the Global Public Health at the Edinburgh University's Medical School, on what this new British subvariant actually was. Here's what she told me. Thank you, Devi, very much for being with us. We've always spoken about how mutations are bound to take place. In terms of this particular mutation, the one that we are seeing in the United Kingdom and the one that's now being reported in China, are they essentially the same?
Yeah, I think right now WHO is saying this is not a variant of concern yet. It is similar to Omicron. The main issue is it looks like it's more transmissible. Estimates about 10% more transmissible, which is why we are seeing this surge in cases everywhere in the world, including here in Britain, as well as in China and other places too.
That's actually quite frightening in a sense, because Omicron was horrifically transmissible, fortunately not as dangerous as Delta. To have something even more transmissible, what do we know about the science or the way this particular strain moves or attaches itself, which part of the cell?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that there are multiple ways that this can enter the cell and in different parts of the body, which is why we are seeing it being able to reproduce and also shed onto other people. The real message to everyone from a public health perspective is that this virus will find you. Right. It is pretty impossible to avoid it. So make sure you're vaccinated. If you can, get a booster so that when you are exposed, you're protected against the really harsh impacts it can bring as a disease.
It's now been a couple of months around the world that we've seen Omicron, and so many millions of people around the world would have had Omicron, and most of them would have gotten better. Is there science now on the efficacy of the existing vaccines against Omicron? I ask this because that would also be particularly relevant with the newer strains.
Yeah, so the great news with this new strain is that it looks like vaccines are just as effective in terms of preventing severe disease and death. And so if you are vaccinated, you have the same protection against this new variant. If you have been vaccinated, you do not need a new vaccine or a different vaccine. So that is good news. But on the flip side, it is causing a wave. It is finding people that, let's say, are vulnerable or elderly or who are more cautious. And that is presenting challenges for hospitals, because those people we know, even being fully vaccinated, might still have to go into hospital for some support.
And is that what you're seeing in the United Kingdom in terms of numbers? Once again, are hospitals are seeing a larger number of people going in?
Yes, unfortunately. So here in Scotland, our wave of hospitalizations is the highest it's ever been. But fortunately, people are recovering. So our death rates are much lower. People are staying shorter stints in hospital too and not going into ICU. The ICU pressure isn't there. It's more general hospital pressure. The other thing we're seeing is very high rates, 1 in 12, 1 in 11, 1 in 13. These are surveys done in the community where they go and they test randomly to try to get a sense of how much virus is there. And those are showing probably the highest levels we've ever had across Britain. And now we're hoping in the weeks ahead, maybe that might tailor off and we'll start to see a decline.
Are we seeing reinfections as well?
Yes, unfortunately, we're seeing people getting it 2 times, 3 times. There are unfortunately even, several dozen people who have been tracked having it 4 times. This is something that will get you again. The hope, though, is your symptoms will be milder, that you can manage it better. But yes, this is a virus that just because you have once doesn't mean you won't get it again. Usually it's a new variant. So people who had the wild type might have got Delta. People with Delta might have got Omicron. And even now we're seeing that people who have got Omicron might get a slight tailored different one. So yes, reinfections are happening.
And again, it's something we've discussed in the past, but I think it's relevant again. Where is the science as far as getting a new vaccine in terms of something which deals with the various variants which we've seen so far and perhaps deals with COVID in a more holistic manner? Is the science available to actually develop that silver bullet?
Well, so pharma companies have been very clear. They don't want to chase variants because if they chase Delta, it'd be too late by now. If they chased Omicron, who knows what we're going to have in a few months. So they've said we actually want to get ahead of it. And I know Bill Gates through the Gates Foundation, Wellcome Trust are trying to work towards a sterilizing vaccine. That is a vaccine that can mean that once you're vaccinated, you cannot get infected. It's what we have against measles, mumps, rubella, a number of other diseases. And that's kind of the big prize now in the next 6 to 8 months. They're hoping, can we reach that goal? Or with this, does it mutate too much? And so does that mean that we'll always be chasing it a bit like the flu, where we try to match and predict what flu strain will be circulating? Some years we get it right. Some years the efficacy is a bit lower.
And what are the signs so far as the science is concerned of this sterilizing vaccine?
Well, it seems like it's very difficult. No teams are very close to it. It seems like most vaccines across the world, whether it's the Chinese vaccines or Russian, are good against severe illness, but stopping infection seems to be a big problem with the virus that mutates so much. And also because it's circulating across the world, all it takes is for this to circulate somewhere in Latin America or, in the Pacific or East Asia, and you get a new variant, and that kind of puts you back in terms of your vaccines. It's not as stable, let's say, as the measles virus. And so that's the real difficulty now. Of course, science has come a long way, but that's kind of the prize. They're saying, can we do something we haven't been able to do before? But there's no early results yet we can point to say we might have that next.
All right, Devi, thank you very much for speaking to us. Once again, sounding caution. I think that we just need to be careful about this. It's not going away anytime fast. Thank you very much indeed, Devi, for being with us.
Thank you.